So I'm happy to announce the next panel discussion, International Cannabis Overview, Evolving Trends, Territories and Opportunities. We're a small crowd right now. Hopefully a few more will trickle in as the discussions go on. But we can make a good applause for our moderator today, Anuj Desai, Head of Commercial Partnerships at Knowde Group. Give him a good applause. Next up, we have Dr. Gavin George, CEO of Puregene. Giacomo Bulleri, lawyer at Studio Legale Bulleri. Boris Moshkovits, co-founder and managing director at alephSana. Christina de Giovanni, CEO of Emerald Media Group. Lukas Hurt, CEO and editor-in-chief of Konopí Magazín. And last but not least, Karen Viviana Castaño Coronado, CCO, Latin America Industrial Hemp Association. All right, take it away, Anuj.
Thank you. Thanks all for joining us. So my name is Anuj Desai. I am a lawyer and host of a long-running podcast called The Cannabis Conversation. I'm also head of commercial partnerships for Knowde Group, who are a life sciences contract research organization specializing in cannabis and psychedelics. We provide strategic and regulatory advice in relation to clinical trials and due diligence for investment funds interested in this sector. We've got a great panel. I'm not going to reintroduce them. I'll allow them to do that themselves in a minute. There's a great amount of views from different parts of the world, so hopefully some good insights for you all. And we're here to talk about international cannabis. Obviously, lots of attention is on North America, with Canada leading the way on establishing a legal market. Honorary mention to Uruguay as the real pioneers in legalization. The US obviously is a huge beast with many different state industries developing, generating large numbers already. However, the focus in North America is overwhelmingly recreational. So how is the rest of the world developing their cannabis industries, particularly because they'll be more medically led? And can we learn anything from the US and Canada in what to do and what not to do? So before we get into the questions, let's just do a bit of an intro. If everyone doesn't mind just telling us a bit about yourself and a high level on what you'd like to talk to today. Gavin, do you want to kick off?
Great, thanks very much, Anuj. My name's Gavin George. I'm the CEO of Puregene. Puregene is really taking, I think, a different approach to the whole industry, especially when it comes to breeding. What we're trying to do is we're trying to deploy kind of a suite of technologies that really help advance the breeding of this plant. And we're very lucky that we can integrate within a broader group of companies that are focused on lifestyle and wellness, pharmaceuticals, wholesale. So we really are tied into an ecosystem where we can hopefully drive this industry forward and make it something that's more stable, accessible, safe, traceable, and really ultimately more a well-developed industry for the future. So that's really the point of view where I come at this whole conversation. And with that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague.
Yeah, I'm Giacomo Bulleri. I'm a lawyer and working as an advisor, a lawyer for companies who want to invest in Europe and in Italy, especially in the industrial hemp sector. And I'm advisor of the European Industrial Hemp Association, the Federcanapa, the Italian National Association, and today I would like to focus on two aspects mentioned in the title of this event, territories and opportunities, because I believe that Europe has in its territories, each with its own peculiarities, characteristics and difference, one of the main elements of development and growth and consequent investment opportunities in its three main areas, industrial, medical, and recreational cannabis. Each of the sector presents significant opportunities, but also some critical issues to be resolved. And personally, I can say that the medical cannabis sector is the most developed and the least problematic for the legal compliance. On the other hand, the recreation industrial sectors still present critical issues to be resolved. And while the recreational cannabis sector depends essentially on policy choice, and in this sense, the expected path of Germany may produce a domino effect on other member states, the industrial hemp sector is paradoxically the one that still has gray areas that need to be defined and regulated, especially in the light of the European Court of Justice ruling in the cannabis case, and I'm finishing. As I have also explained to the European Commission during the civil dialogue groups, it is desirable for regulatory choice to be made at European Union level in order to avoid the risk of a two-speed Europe and the consequent damage for the common market organization and the competition. Because in fact, as of today, in one hand, there are countries that have already regulated the use of the hemp wool plant and some CBD products, as Czech, Poland, Croatia, and France. On the other hand, the Mediterranean country, Italy, Spain, Greece, and Portugal, that insist on maintaining the flower as drug and insist to say that flower and CBD can only be intended for pharmaceutical use. This is the problem of today.
Thank you. Boris?
Hi, Boris Moshkovits. To understand what I say is also to understand where I come from. I come from communications. I was a journalist, a consultant, and in 2016, when Weed Maps came to Germany and Jerry Lauder's in the house, I became a follower, a consultant, and I emerged into that space that we now are still developing. And I think this is the most important thing what we do. I've started a company called alephSana, and we're a wholesaler. Because that is one role that is important in building the portfolio for the patients. We understood that the patients didn't have the choices, didn't have the supply, didn't have any, let's say, consistent product in the market. So being a wholesaler became a role that was very important in building that market. And also, what we're still doing, and I'm a co-founder of the German Medical Cannabis Society, was also changing the narrative, destigmatizing, playing a role in the general perception. I mean, Germany is expected to be the biggest market in recreational, but at the same time, we're already growing the medical market, and a couple of companies, let's say a handful of companies, are profitable. Everybody else is struggling, is building, and it's growing its businesses in this industry. So what I do want to talk about is the discrepancy between the state of euphoria and the state of panic that we all experience. So I wonder, is this a traveling bubble, or is there actual core? And what can we do for this to be sustainable business in the future?
Thank you, Boris. Christina?
I'm Christina Di Giovanni. I am joining you all from New York City. And in 2012, I founded the Emerald Media Group after finding myself a victim of the war on drugs. I awoke one morning, as many Americans themselves found this in a similar situation. Over-policing in America, I woke up with law enforcement at my front door. I was apprehended for essentially, long story short, cannabis possession. And so I felt that my civil rights were violated. I felt like our civil rights were just an illusion. And so I decided the pen is mightier than the sword. And I started a media company for people like myself so that they can have a platform and a voice to be heard in this emerging market, because I knew that, we're not criminals, we're not degenerates, we're community members. And there was no positive representation for people in the cannabis industry at that time. We've had High Times Magazine, but that had a very particular demographic, and so I wanted to create something a bit more female-friendly. I wanted to talk about issues such as pregnancy in cannabis, which is very controversial, but it's something that needs to be discussed. Autism in cannabis, a variety of different medical opportunities that can benefit from medical cannabis, and as we transition into the recreational market, what does cannabis look like? Because we did fall into the stoner stereotypes, and people that are in the industry, we know that that's not true. And so that's how I created the Emerald, and that was 10 years ago. So.
Thank you. Lukas?
Okay, hello, thank you for inviting me. My name is Lukas. I'm from the Czech Republic, which is a very interesting place to be regarding cannabis at the moment. And I'm an official registered patient, and I'm also publisher and editor-in-chief of Magazín Konopí, which is a bi-monthly magazine about cannabis focused on medical side, and we work with patients and doctors, and the main goal is to interconnect these groups, which is the main topic of many discussions here, that the patients have some wishes and needs, and the doctors, usually most of them, don't know how to address them, so that's why we set up this magazine, and through that magazine I'm also working with lawmakers, with researchers, and all the people in the cannabis sector in Czech Republic, which is growing pretty fast, and there are some really interesting changes which we will get into later, I suppose, and yeah, basically that's what I do.
Thank you, Lukas. Karen?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Karen Castaño from Colombia. I am working with, I'm co-creator with Lorenzo Rolim and Juan Matos Paredes from Spain of LAIHA, Latin American Industrial Hemp Association. I'm here, also, I'm working with the Hemp Benchmarks. This is an American cannabis market researcher, and I'm the aggregate of Latin America. We are building I think the official database of the price, following of the prices, and we are involved in the main current project around the hemp market, and cannabis not too much. We are focused in grain and fiber, but I'm working with Hemp Benchmark, so I'm always update in everything in the market. So I'm here to bring to you news about Latin America. We are going to be a monster in the next few years, and I hope you think about us.
Thank you, Karen. We'll hear more about the monster in a minute, I think. Christina, can we kick off with you in terms of the questions? So, obviously the US started off with medical cannabis, and that kind of kick-started the legalization movement over there. How do you think things are progressing now, and do you think medical has been left behind in the US?
Yes, I do believe that medical cannabis patients are being left behind, and that is the conversation that's happening in the medical lane. The United States as a whole, we are progressing forward. I believe there's about 38 or 39 states right now that have recreational cannabis, and if they have recreational, then they have a medical program. One of the things that medical patients can benefit from is, either paying no taxes on their products or just a larger discount on taxes. I believe there's maybe about a dozen states that have no medical or recreational program, and they're medical refugees. A lot of people would move to Colorado, or they'd move to California, for their children, for themselves. And so, slowly but surely, each state is coming online. And I have to say that now, it's almost as though cannabis is a little old school. The focus now is on psychedelics. And, our president made an announcement. Obviously, he's up for re-election soon. He claims that in the next 2 years, psilocybin, MDMA, these will all be decriminalized. But a lot of us in the industry are like, well, what about cannabis? We don't have interstate commerce. There was a woman on the last panel who mentioned this. Certain states are trying to organize sales in between Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada. They're all connected. They're all recreational. So it would make sense to send products out of the state. And what states are experiencing now, especially California, is extreme saturation in the market. A lot of these operators are struggling to keep their head above water. The price of the pound before legalization in California, could have been $2,500. Now it could be $400, and there's a considerable amount of overhead that goes into cultivation. So if you're spending $250,000 a year on your electric bill, on your soil, maybe on your trimmers or your workers, and you're only retailing those pounds for $400, it doesn't make sense. So a lot of people are struggling. They want interstate commerce. Unfortunately, the medical market does suffer with this as well. And so, like I say, we are moving forward. Medical patients, I personally believe that there needs to be more investment in medical research. That lane has just been left out in the cold. Everything from cancer to autism to, as I said earlier, even pregnancy, breastfeeding. I mean, these are all topics that people are discussing, but no one is putting the money into actually finding the research. Some research is out there, but not enough research.
Working for a research company, I totally agree with you. Thank you, Christina. Boris, let's move to Germany. Obviously, biggest territory in Europe and definitely leading the way, and obviously set for some potential big moves in the near future. How do you think that's all shaping up in terms of adult use, and how do you think that will affect medical when it goes online?
I mean, we're being part of that conversation. As members of the association, we get to talk to the politicians, and we get a lot of promises. So let's say at this point, the timeline is something like there's going to be bullet points by the end of the year. I think they're going to draft a law maybe next year. We're talking about recreational, obviously. So, and then it's going to be the whole parliamentary discussion. It's going to take all of 23. So maybe by the end of 23, we'll have a draft that will be going through Parliament. But we also have a Senate. So let's say it goes into Senate by 24. If it goes through Senate, then the next thing is it has to go to the local authorities, because it is a federal law, but the implementation goes through the local authorities. So that will take all of 24. So I guess by the end of 24, maybe early 25, that's a realistic look from my point on the recreational market. And they'll be promising us it's going to be fast. I don't see how. Because as you know, from the legal side, there's also the problem of import. We're looking at 2 international treaties that we would be breaking, so we would have to grow in Germany. We only have 3 legal medical licenses, which also doesn't mean automatically that they will cultivate for the recreational market. So in fact, we don't have anybody cultivating anything for the recreational market in Germany, unless you allow the patients to grow their own. Or you look at Luxembourg, and Germany was waiting, I think, for Luxembourg to see what they're going to come up with, and they came up with home grow for plants. So the discussion is all over the place in Germany right now. Politicians tell you, we love coffee shops, we love social clubs, we're the socialist party. There's so much, or there's so little knowledge in the political sphere that I'm afraid it will take time. So the effect on medical, let's say recreational comes, of course that will impact medical like it did in all the other countries. So we'll see less flower, because 2/3 of the patients today are private paying patients. They're paying out of their pocket. They're using the doctor like a dispensary. And we know that, and we heard that from Alfredo. Basically, a lot of companies are pitching the patient directly. So once recreational comes at a fair price that is competitive to the medical, or even less, a lot of medical patients will merge. For flower, extracts is not a big market at this point anyway, and edibles, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's say recreational doesn't come, then medical will go through the roof because of that. Recreational comes, medical will not stagnate, but what recreational will do, it will help fight the stigma in society. So we will see more patients. It's not going to be a huge market, but it will be a stable market, and it will also evolve. It will evolve from flower to extracts to APIs to formulations to more finished product to be an actual medicine for actual patients.
Yeah, I agree with that. So thank you. Lukas, moving on to you.
I want to compliment something. I was thinking about it, and I think we have to press the government to make a real system, because the stigma of our industry is created by them. So if there are not a real system that is controlling, and there are not a serious, control, and we are going to use, we are going to use and consume adequate the industry, if the system is strong and seriously. And I think here in Europe, you have to think in group. Everything have to be the same access and the same system and the same service of medical. Yeah, that's it.
Agreed. It would be nice if everyone could work as a group. Let's hope.
My opinion.
Thank you, Karen. Lukas, so obviously Germany gets the most attention in Europe for good reasons, but there's some pretty interesting stuff happening in Czech Republic, like the 1% THC rule, like our lovely Swiss hosts have. What else is happening in Czech Republic?
So basically, to give you some background, because not many people here are probably familiar with what's happening in Czech Republic for past 10 years, or just about that. We have been one of the first countries in Europe to legalize medical cannabis in 2013 through legislative action. But the growth was very slow in the beginning, basically because the doctors didn't want to prescribe it, and the flower from the beginning was only high THC flower, so this caused many problems to naive cannabinoid naive patients. It all started to change quickly in 2020 when we introduced reimbursement. So for past 2 years, the medical cannabis has been reimbursed with 90% of the cost, which means it got rapidly cheaper for the patients, and the number of patients and prescribed grams started to rise like this. And but the problems still persist with the doctors, because the number of doctors is not really growing the same as the number of patients is growing. So basically it means that the same doctors are prescribing more and more cannabis to more and more patients, but it's hard to teach new doctors, to persuade them to start prescribing cannabis as well. Regarding the new laws and changes in this January, we just allowed to grow medical cannabis domestically to more companies, because for the past 8 years there was only one domestic grower allowed, and everything else has been imported mainly from Canada. Now, since January the 1st, there is an unlimited number of licenses. You just need to fill out the form and comply with all the requirements, but there can be an unlimited number of growers, and we also allow the export of medical cannabis. So since January the 1st, you can grow in Czech Republic medical cannabis and export it anywhere in the world, to Germany or some other countries. Germany is the closest one, so obviously most investors will be looking into this, and I've been in touch with many investors recently who are actually looking into this and want to come to Czech and build the facilities and start growing in Czech country, which is like it's much cheaper to build a facility and employ people than in Western Europe. And also we legalized 1% THC, as you said. So we are actually the first country in the EU which allows now cannabis with up to 1% THC, which is also very good attraction for many companies, because now they can go to Czech Republic and start producing CBD strains which have much more CBD because of the limit of THC. So it's very attractive, and there are extraction companies from Poland building facilities in Czech Republic at the moment. So it's been only 8 months, and I've seen really huge investment coming into Czech Republic regarding this cannabis. And also this breaking hot news, we are actually starting the discussion about the recreational legalization as well. So 3 days ago, I was actually at a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister of the Czech Republic and our Czech National Drug Coordinator, Jindřich Vobořil, who is trying to push the agenda on the whole EU level. But next week, they should be introducing this in the Czech government. So basically, we are just making jokes now if it will be Germany first or Czech Republic first. And it could be very interesting to start talking about the interstate commerce between our two countries, because we have common border. So maybe we could try to set some precedent and example to the rest of Europe. So hopefully these things will be happening, and Czech Republic could be leading the way in some aspects.
Yeah, very interesting. Lots of regular news coming out of Czech Republic. So thank you for that. Giacomo, let's move over to CBD. That CBD craze seems to have plateaued a bit now, just as regulators are starting to put some rules down. How are you seeing the EU looking at CBD and whole plant use in general?
Well, Europe has shown that it's sensitive to these issues, and the various relevant Directions Generale, DG Agri, DG Grow, and DG Santé, are working on their respective papers in food, cosmetic, and feeds for the question of the CBD and the use of the whole plant. Newer than the question is New and additional scientific evidence will certainly be needed to demonstrate the safety of the products, especially to show how the interpretations of the Ministry of Health, especially of the countries with restrictive interpretation, are based on partial and erroneous data. Suffice it to consider how, to date, the studies on the tolerability of THC for humans are based on partial and unrepresentative data. One study is from the 90s, conducted on terminally ill SIDA patients. That is certainly not the average healthy subject. And the other is conducted of a sample of just 11 people. That for sure is not representative. For this reason, the European Industry Hemp Association has promoted clinical studies on a sample of 200 patients, which we think could be decisive to with regard to the daily intake of CBD and the THC, and we think will be useful to unlock the use of CBD and full spectrum oils as food and food supplement. For sure, I think, and I repeat, as I said before, that the solution must be unified at European level, and we must avoid a two-speed Europe in this situation, where some countries can freely produce and sell this product, and the other countries cannot be produced the same products. Because the situation creates a big damage to the business, the common market organization, the competition, because the countries with a respective interpretation, as Italy and Spain, for example, will find themselves in the position of being subject to the import of the same banned products, to the detriment just for the national producer, due to the effect of the free principle of free movement of goods. That is a basic principle of European Union. Yeah. So this is our question.
Yeah, it's fundamental, isn't it? Thank you, Giacomo. Karen, let's talk about the monster, Latin America.
It's true.
So give us a high level on what's happening.
Okay. From Latin America, I want to bring three main aspects that I consider are the main: political issues, quality, and the recommendation of the association. But before, I want to remember to you three highlights about Latin America. Remember, tropical climate, always the same. Our land extensions, qualified labor in cannabis production, and lower cost of production in general. So this is just to remember. But now I consider Latin America a Pandora's box, because now we are opening on the world, and in the political landscape is increasingly beneficial for the industry. Is beneficial. My president in Colombia, for example, the last week said the cannabis industry should be as all of them industry, as the rice, as corn, and everything. That is crazy, because he can't do it right now. But this is a project, in a real soon project. And for example, Argentina is opening, they has a law, and we are waiting for the regulation. Argentina has an incredible platform, agricultural platform, with the soybean production. They are a monster, really, and like Brazil. Brazil is coming soon too, right? And can you imagine my continent united Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador. We have 11 countries with legislation right now. Colombia, Argentina, Uruguay was the first, Peru, Chile, very agricultural country too. Mexico going to open the market too, and focus in recreational. It's the only country that is focused on recreational. It's crazy. Can you imagine this market? So 100 million people in Mexico City. It's crazy. I think in this moment, Europe have to export to Mexico the cannabis. But can you imagine, what do you think about it? If we don't take a united decision in our blocks, of economic blocks, Europe and America, we have to work together, don't you think? And specialize in our advantage. And if we have extensions, I think we're going to cultivate, but Europe have to press with the technology. And we too, we can do it. America and Latin America has increased the economies a lot in the last 20 years. And we are able to do whatever. But let's think, how are the good mechanisms to make this, to make an alliance and distribute in the right way the industry between everybody, right? Because Asia, Thailandia, crazy. Africa, crazy. Yeah. So it's awesome, huh? After, we are preparing with our quality of the flowers, because, for example, Colombia, only the last month made the first export of flowers. So before, we were not focused in this, in the quality. And right now, we are preparing with energy in this, in get the certifications and everything that you know. And we need help. You, right? You are the experticians, and you have to go with us to Latin America too, but quick. And after, the people say, no, in Latin America there are not a good flower. What? Don't you know nothing? And I have to show my telephone and look at this, and the people say, oh, because there are taboos, I think, or the companies there is suffering of that, I think, but are not so popular, the good companies. I have very friendly companies close to me. For example, Colombian Organics, my sponsor. They have license GMP, and in the processing to get the GACP, right? GACP, and very soon we are going to be able to export very good quality, and we are preparing for that. Not only Colombia, Ecuador too. Here there are companies from Ecuador, very, very good flowers. We have everything, perfect conditions and expertise, cultivators.
Thank you.
We know that. So this is my proposal, that don't forget Latin America, and everybody have to support the industry, the global industry, and we have to make a good alliance.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think that global trade will kind of needs to be sorted out with the treaties at the top of it, I would imagine. But yeah, it'd be great if we can all work together. Gavin, now you're up. So in my opinion, industrial hemp is often the neglected piece of the cannabis puzzle. It has great green credentials, can be used for lots of different things. How do you see that sector developing in Europe?
I think it's really important, but I think before you talk about that, you have to zoom out a little bit and look at the cannabis industry as a whole. So we often liken the cannabis industry to we're kind of building the aeroplane while we're flying it, right? Except we're building this aeroplane while we're flying through a regulatory storm and a flock of geese that are coming for our engines, which are the incumbent cannabis companies who have so expertly dismantled the value of their investors. So it's really challenging for Europe, even though we all know that Europe is a much bigger market, twice the size of the United States, with a population which is much more tolerant and accepting of cannabis more broadly. So we know that it's going to be massive here, but we have to really just tackle this opportunity. And I think that what Puregene is trying to do is, on one level, we're trying to address one of the key challenges in the industry, and this is we see that there's a lot being built on a bit of a shaky ground. Cannabis is still a very underbred plant. It's still an orphan crop, in our opinion. We face massive challenges with
What does orphan crop mean?
An orphan crop is something that hasn't been bred at all, effectively. So if you're looking around nature, the flowers you see growing in the fields, if you wanted to put those into production, you would have to really work on them to bring them up to a level where you're enriched for the good traits and then they're ready for agricultural, industrial production. So really, even though there's been a lot of art form breeding in cannabis, it's taken the breeding so far, but not quite to the level where it's ready for proper, stable industrial production. So that's where we want to bridge the gap on the flower type. So with that in mind, I think we're still facing additional challenges with the stigma that we've spoken a lot about at this conference. And what we want to do is we want to say, okay, let's build the foundation correctly. Let's take a real scientific approach to the breeding of this plant so that we have something that's stable and industrially ready and marketable, something that you can build pharmacological studies on and really get good, solid data about these varieties that we're developing. But let's also fight the stigma, and let's try and find the rest of the opportunities that come out of cannabis, because cannabis is more than just a medicine. And this is where the industrial hemp comes in. And I think if we focus on the broader narrative that we're faced with cannabis, and we say that this is a medicine, it's an effective medicine, it's a safe medicine, it's also a safe way to have some fun. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's also a source of protein. It's also a source of fibers. This is what Karen is talking about. It has the potential to really disrupt incumbent agriculture in a meaningful, green way. We can shorten supply chains. We can really implement new agricultural systems locally so that they feed into local economies, growing local labor forces and expertise. And this is where I think if we spread this story about cannabis, not just the medicine, not just the recreational, but the potential to really help all of humanity, it'll differentiate us from the groups that are looking at just psilocybin for particular applications, which I have no problem with. It's just that cannabis is bigger than that. And I think the story gets lost. It gets lost in these little silos that we have. And if we do expand the story, it helps with the regulators. They start to see, look, this is more than just a flower. This is more than just tax revenue. This is energy security. It's food security. And that's what we're trying to do from the Puregene side. We're really trying to advance the narrative, put in place the science, and hopefully put a stable foundation for an industry that can only grow from this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I were talking yesterday about, I found that really interesting what you were talking about breeding, and maybe you just want to share a bit about how far away you think we are and what the potential increase in yields might be in, I mean, it's a bit crystal ball, but where do you see that?
It is a bit of a crystal ball, but we have a lot of information to fall back on. So looking at things like corn, we've had a 350% increase in corn productivity in the past 80 years. Soybean, what's grown in Karen's area, 450% in the same time, or even less. These are just agricultural crops. They're plants,
Exactly.
just like cannabis. And that genetic headroom exists in cannabis, and in fact, because of the art form breeding that's happened around the world, has been maintained. We've got this enormous genetic resource that we can improve these plants on year on year on year. And we're right now, if you look at hemp, it's not far away from the productivity values of things like soybean, eucalyptus trees, which we're using to create a lot of cellulose for paper production. But the opportunities with hemp are so much greater. You can grow it anywhere, you can grow it fast, you can sequester a lot of carbon in this plant, you can use it for local supply chains, and the range of products that you can produce from this plant, in theory, are massive. But what we always try to tell people and really drill home is that right now, it's not ready.
Yeah.
It's not economically competitive with the incumbent agricultural crops. And we need to first recognize that, set realistic timelines in place, and then address the challenge one step at a time.
Yeah.
And then it will be one of the major crops in agriculture.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm very excited about that. I have loads more questions, but I think we're now going to throw it open to you guys for some Q&A, if anyone feels like quizzing someone on stage.
Hi, thank you so much for this very interesting insight. I have a question for Karen. How's actually the situation in terms of like that case, mushrooms in Mexico? I'm always wondering, because it seems a very mushroom-friendly culture. So, and I'm always wondering if you could, if you could talk a little bit about that. It would be interesting.
Mexico.
Mexico, yeah.
Yes, of course. Mexico, it's a beautiful country, but it's next to United States. So it's so complicated, this regulation, but there are right now mechanisms to cultivate cannabis. It's a legal resource. It is called amparo. And this year was the government granted the first license for a company. Because if you are a person and ask for the permission, the government give you without problem. But it's so complicated. It's a compliance matter completely. It's only lawyers fighting. And only one company has this permission. And you can see it's a country with political will, but it's next to United States. And so this is controlled, and Mexico cannot touch the California market, for example. This is protected, and everybody knows that. But they are acting, I think, wisdom. They are allowing projects with a good work in the business plan and with a good site. This is the vision that I have of Mexico. And we have associates from Mexico. There are a lot of people and companies interested in making pressure to the government. And I think very soon the government has to take a surprise with us. But right now it's very slow. Only recreational market is in medical, of course, medical and recreational. They are preparing something, and this law, I think, 1 year, or this is the estimated time. And I forget to say also that in Paraguay we have the the biggest crop of hemp, 2,000 hectares of hemp, and it was a very successful crop. This company is called Healthy Grains. They are my associates too, and they design a vertical companies, a structure integrated, and they are focused in exporting only final products, everything, mayo, butter, tea, everything from hemp in food. And they are researching what about the fiber. This is our plan right now, in researching everything. And we are waiting, make a good alliance with Pure to investigate the genetics to this tropicalization of the seed. Because in the south, it's easy to Argentina, in the south cone, it's easy because it works the same genetic. But in the equatorial countries, como, like Colombia and Ecuador, Brazil, to north of Peru, we need to work in genetic a lot because we don't have the light hours. Only 12.
Cheers.
But Mexico is close to open, but they have to think and rethink how to don't affect the United States.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm coming from South Africa, and I'm from Friends of Hemp South Africa. So Karen, I'm definitely going to meet you afterwards. And but I'm more interested in the question of fiber for woven and non-woven applications. And specifically, you were talking about, Gavin, about the various land races. And I mean, the Asian land race, we have the challenge that the European land races do not do well in our climate. And so we are looking very much into Asian land races. But recently we are having more and more the discussions about, in the Global South, I think the Global South should come together, to be honest. Because, I mean, a lot of the land races which are used currently, also in the medical cannabis side, are originally land races from the Global South. And there's a lot of discussion about how to basically repatriate those land races in a sense, so that the Global South also benefits from it, and not only the Global North, like it is currently. So, there are a couple of discussions, I think, which would be very interesting, and I hope you allow me to approach you later on for a more in-depth discussion on that.
Certainly, but I think you're touching on a few very important points there. One of the most important topics from my point of view is not limited to hemp. It's actually a problem across the entire cannabis industry. And this is when you have a plant which is bred or selected for one environment and you take it to any other environment, it's always going to perform differently, at least. So I think this is one of the things that we're seeing as one of the major challenges within the industry, is that you have perhaps an art form breeder who creates maybe the most fantastic flower type variety that's ever been produced. And then you try to take it to industrial scale production in a new environment and it doesn't perform. Or you get the performance up and it decreases over time. And this is very common in plants that are not well bred. The other side of that is on the hemp side, is you talking about totally different geographies in a plant that's being grown outside under different day length conditions and different latitudes, different climates, different pathogen loads. I think the tendency is to look at this and say a plant is a plant, and it's not. You really have to see this as a much more complicated problem initially, recognize the investment that needs to go into developing the varieties that can ultimately be put into production, but then plan for the other thing that you're talking about, which is local economic development. Because we're sitting on the precipice of one of the greatest opportunities in agriculture that I think we may ever see in our lives. And what we don't want to do is let all of that value be captured by a few, when that value can really be captured by a broad base of communities. And this is my kind of passion when it comes to cannabis, why we're working so hard to develop projects in Africa, in Latin America, and we really want to see this becoming really one of the biggest positive changes in agriculture that we can see in our lifetimes. So I'd love to talk to you some more on this topic later.
Anyone else? I've got a question. We didn't get to talk about terpenes, actually, and I wanted to ask Christina and Boris in particular. So obviously terpenes is the new marketing buzzword. What are you seeing in the US in particular? Obviously you've got lots of recreational products.
Yeah, I'm currently like in the recreational market, when people go into dispensaries, not everyone, but a lot of people want to get the highest for the cheapest price. And that's been going on for a long time. But now that the industry is advancing, there are things like terpenes, which exist in fruit. I mean, it's not just cannabis. There's over 400 different terpenes in cannabis, but now we're able to do a little bit of research and say, sour diesel, for example, it's got mycene, that's the terpene, that helps with inflammation. So now consumer brands, and Emerald being a consumer media company, we're able to profile these different products. We're able to say, oh, you have inflammation, oh, you have anxiety and depression. Try this terpene, it might work for you. And so that's slowly becoming the new narrative for consumer products. So I would say, to anyone who wants to launch maybe a CBD brand or eventually a THC brand, think about the end user and how you want your product to make them feel. And terpenes are great to just educate your consumers about, let them know exactly what it is, why the specific product is good for, as I said, inflammation or anxiety. And so that's where a lot of products in the dispensaries are moving towards is, we want to feel good. Some people want to, they want to get really high. They do the extracts, or some people just want, maybe a 1-to-1 CBD to THC ratio. But now, like I said, as the industry is expanding, we're able to expand the narrative. We're able to go into these different cannabinoids, whether it's THCO or CBN or CBG, and really just talk about what that does to you, what you can expect from it, versus in the past where you might take a hit of some flower and you don't know what's in it. You could be very paranoid afterwards for a long time, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people. You could be very energetic, which is not great if you're trying to go to bed. So that's kind of where the consumer product brands are going, and just telling their story, saying how their product differentiates from others, and terpenes they're right there at the forefront of that narrative.
Thank you. Boris?
Yeah, I would say in the end, it's a differentiator. To some degree, but at the same time, what you were talking about the properties, there is no founded studies on that. So let's say for the consumer market, it's okay to play with the terps. Feels a little bit in the German market that we had the high THC is one hype, so the next hype is the terps. There is, and believe me, I do appreciate terpenes. I just don't appreciate that all the companies are running in the same direction, and it feels like we're all lemmings and going in one hype. So this is what I said before. We need to understand the true trends, the true development of this industry. And that is actually bringing the terps in conjunction with properties. And that has to be, it's about education, it's about research, it's about results. It's a little bit about narrative and storytelling, but not only. And at this point, it feels there's a lot of story in it. And one thing I want to say, again, I do think hemp is a big part of the cannabis story altogether, but when you disrupt an industry, we are disrupting an industry which is the illicit market. The hemp industry is disrupting legit businesses. So you're looking at paper industry, cotton industry, energy industry, construction industry, you know what? In the end, they'll profit from it. They'll understand the business case, and they'll use that resource to make a better business. The businesses we are disrupting, these people don't want to be disrupted, or they want to be included. We need to understand that in Germany, we always talk about 400 tons is going to be at least a conservative recreational market. Maybe it's 600 tons, but they're already out there. It's not like we're starting from zero. There's product, and now coming back to terpenes, imitating the Cali hype of terpenes, we already have that in the street. So we do have beautiful packaging that looks the same like in California. We do talk about Cali strains, we do talk about terps, and we have to get in touch, or at least in some sort of communication with that talent. And I keep saying, bringing into the light. In the States, it's called the legacy market for a reason.
Yeah. Thank you, Boris. One more?
Hi, thank you very much. I have a question about production. So as we all know, the price of energy is increasing, especially in Europe. So I guess my question is directed to either Giacomo, Boris, or Lukas. Are the producers worried about this? Do you think that this will be the final push to shift most of the majority of cannabis cultivation out to the fields, but at the same time revealing that you cannot control your environment in the fields as good as you can do in a greenhouse, revealing that there is a huge problem with the genetics that cannabis producers are cultivating? So are you starting to receive this feedback from your network? And what do you think they're going to do?
I can start. Well, in Czech Republic, there was a huge CBD boom last year, and then suddenly, because of the energy prices and also the market was saturated, the prices went down, and the companies who were growing indoor are bankrupting in a lot. And so now currently, the companies are just thinking who survived or who are surviving and want to thrive. They just need to incorporate growing in greenhouses. So finding a middle ground to grow outside in the greenhouse and use some light to just finish the ripening of cannabis or these things, because only indoor growing it's very expensive and it's getting more expensive, and so these trends are happening, and people who are growing indoor are moving to countryside and finding places with greenhouses which already exist. But obviously, if you grow medical grade cannabis, you can grow it outdoor because you need totally controlled environment. So it depends where your focus is, and definitely indoor growing, because of the electricity prices, is very, very, very hard nowadays, and that's why the technology is also evolving towards LED lights, because they are less energy consumption. So that's it. These trends are happening, definitely.
Yeah. Let me add one thing to cultivators. I think it's important that you first recognize your market, because different markets have different regulations, and you can't cater to all markets at all times. And let's say Germany, again, the medical tender seemed so sophisticated and difficult, but in the end, I don't know if it's a secret or not, but Demicon is growing inside, but they're growing GACP indoors. So there's ways to have a reasonable and, let's say, low-cost cultivation indoors, and then go GMP if necessary. If you're talking for Israel, it needs to be irradiated. For other countries, it doesn't have to be. So cultivators at this point do the mistake that they just start a cultivation without understanding the market. They do think about big scale, and they come up with minimum quantities of hundreds of kilos that can be placed into a market that is already crowded. All these markets are crowded at this point. With total overproduction, we heard how much material is being destroyed. Let's say if 20 tons go into Germany, half of it is destroyed. So whatever you do, understand who you grow for, and then you'll know how to grow.
Thank you, guys. I think we're out of time now, and probably people are hungry. So thank you for joining us, and please give a round of applause to our panelists.